Hi, Genja and Jonas from Satsare. This is Stand or Starve, a board game that we made. It's about the struggle of survival, where you lead empires by planning resources and fighting foes. In this guide, we're gonna talk about how to play this game. So, after unpacking the game, this is how the board looks. Let's start with the three types of resources that you would encounter in this game. The first one is food. This you would use to stay alive in the game. You would also use it to produce villagers. The next card we have metal. This card you would use to produce towers and also warriors. The next card we have is wood, which you would use to produce roads, which connect stations, and also towers, which protect stations. Let's start with the building type components. So first you have the tower. This costs 20 metal and 20 wood to build, and you would place it normally on stations to enhance your combat capabilities. You can also use roads to put on roads, of course, and that would connect the stations. Roads cost 10 wood. Next, we have two types of units. One is warriors. The warriors, they both attack and protect stations. You would order them right here. And villagers, which produce resources. You would typically put them on stations like so. We have three types of stations. You have farms, which produce food, mines, which produce metal, and sawmill that produces wood. In the central area, you have double the resource gain in order to encourage a push to the center. But be careful because you can get flanked from the side. Let's continue with a couple of strategy tips that we have prepared for you guys so you can easily start. Now think about it. You have 20 food cards, 20 wood cards, 20 metal cards at the start of the game. So there's three different approaches that you can use. You can be offensive. What you would do then is that you plan the production for 10 wood and 1 warrior. Thus, you expand on the map, putting 3 roads and 1 warrior on a station. Or you can play defensively by putting the production for 10 metal and 10 wood. That way you can build a tower very early in the game and turtle your position. Alternatively, you can focus on expanding your economy by producing a villager and putting 10 on food. The strategy that you pick depends on the map that you're playing, the opponents that you're facing, and the starting order. And it's up to you which strategy you want to go ahead and begin with. You can also, of course, experiment. There's different ways of playing. After you know all of the components, let's start the game by setting up the game. Normally, you would choose a faction and a color. In this case, I'm red for Sparta. And then you would throw a dice. My buddy here will throw the green dice and I'll throw the red one. In this case, he has higher than me, so he would normally pick the capital, which is your starting location at the beginning of the game. Now that my buddy won the dice roll, he will get the orange starting token, which indicates a full cycle. I will now hand over the resources, since I'm the bank, and you give him 20 wood, 20 food, 10 metal. You will also give him 1 warrior, 2 villagers, and 3 roads. My buddy now will continue to choose a starting location, whichever he chooses. He chooses that capital, from which he will choose which way he wants to build his roads and secure a station. In this case, he chose to go for the farm. He has to put a warrior on top of a station in order to yield food from the station. Next, he will choose what he will produce in his capital. In this case, he went for a quick expansion strategy, which is producing villagers and producing food. Remember, whenever you produce villagers or warriors, you would have to pay, in this case 10 food. You can also see the amount to pay directly on the board. And once you have decided what you want to produce, in this case a unit, you put it on the boat. It is delivered the next cycle. Of course, in the correct color.
So how the cycle system works is after all players from the starting point of the orange marker has made their turn and it comes back to the first player, that concludes a full cycle turn. You can use a white marker on each of the cycle counters to count which cycle you're on. After each cycle, you move up the white marker until it reaches the last one. When you have finished the 5th cycle, it goes back to the first one, but it also increases the food cost of each round.
I will now explain the two other types of cards there is in this game. There is tool cards, for example, a sword, which increases the dice attack by 1. Tool cards only affect you as a player. In contrast, we have event cards, which affect all of the players. In this case, we have Rain Season, which doubles the food production. You are also free to trade in this game when it's your turn. So for example, green here could trade with red if he wants to, for example, receive food for metal. And it's up to the players to decide price for this trade. You can also trade warriors, villagers, and tool cards. Let's start with how do you win or lose in this game. So if green plays against red and it's only 2 players, then you can either lose by having a negative food count at the end of a cycle, or if your capital gets captured for at least 1 cycle. In order to attack the capital, your warrior has to be in a station adjacent to that capital, and it takes 1 extra cycle to move the warrior to attack the capital. I will now proceed to explain how combat works. Let's say I'm red here, and we're fighting over the capital. In this case, we have 2 warriors fighting for each side. And in order to determine the winner here, we would roll the dice, like so. Because we rolled equally, both of them gets killed. But let's say it was another dice roll. In this case, green gets a higher number than red, and therefore the warrior here is lost. There is also tool cards in the game which modify the combat mechanics of this game. If you have, for example, a sword, you would add 1 to your dice. So, for example, if you have equal dice turns, then in that case, actually green would be killed, like so. Lastly, with this guide, we wanted to provide you a simple way to get started with Stand or Starve. Stand or Starve is a much more comprehensive game, so remember to have fun, and most importantly, remember, don't starve.